Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and today I'm going to be reviewing Castle Itter, another entry into the Valiant Defense series designed by David Thompson and published by Dan Verssen Games. Castle Itter is actually the first game designed in the Valiant Defense series, but it's the second one to be published. And this game is based on the strangest battle of World War II. This battle technically happened after World War II was a done deal, but the SS was doing one last rampage through the countryside, and a motley crew of soldiers and defenders gathered at Castle Itter to hold it against the incoming Germans. And what's interesting about this battle is that you have people of different nationalities all fighting together, including SS officers fighting alongside Frenchmen, fighting alongside Americans, and Austrian resistance fighters. So basically, it's a really strange set of alliances, and everybody is going up against this last gasp of German aggression. So this battle was actually really tough, and the game reflects that. So what's going to happen is that you're going to be placing all of your defenders into the castle. We do have our French prisoners down here who are going to start in the cellar, who can come out later. And for your first several turns, you're going to be deploying them to various locations and taking actions against the Germans. The Germans are going to start with a rifleman on each of the access points with pathways going towards the castle. And they're going to keep adding and adding and adding guys to the board. Your goal is not to defeat them all, but instead to survive. So basically, you're going to try to survive this entire chunky deck of bad things that can happen to you, and there are a lot of bad things that can happen. It's also possible to end the game a little bit earlier if you can shuffle in the 142nd Infantry Regiment card. In real life, a professional tennis player escaped from Castle Itter and went and got reinforcements. So it's possible within the game to recreate that event and end the game a little bit earlier because help comes. So essentially what you're going to always be doing is putting your people out somewhere on the board, and once they're out there, they can just move from location to location. You're allowed to attack, try to lay down suppressive fire, so that if, enemy soldiers start moving along different areas that you want to keep them out of, you have something you can do about it. Every time you take an action, so let's say that Lee is over here. If he takes an action over here, he'll become exhausted. So he can either take a recover action in order to get back in the game, or if there's someone with a command ability, which is the C on some of these counters, then a commander is able to recover multiple units at once if he's in the same location that they are. If you're disrupted, which means that an enemy has hit you, you can also take a recover action to flip back over and get back in the game. If one of your defenders is disrupted by an enemy and gets hit again, then you have a casualty on your hands and they die. A lot of your defenders are going to have special letters on them that tell you a little bit about what they do. So for example, here's one of our SS people I was talking about. He's got a command power. And the stats on top tell you about how many dice he's able to roll when he attacks. T is for tank, and people with the tank marker on them get some special abilities when they're over in the tank that you get to use in the battle. So we have a tank over here called Besotten Jenny, and she can get destroyed at some point during the game, and that's almost inevitable, but you want to get as much out of the tank while you have it as you can. So you're going to be sending people over here, laying down heavy fire, and then choosing your moment to get the heck out of Dodge because everything's going to blow up in there. M is for morale. So what this means is that if this defender is with someone else who becomes a casualty, then they go too because they're so upset by what happened that they just give up the ghost. However, you also have people with the officer attribute, and if there's a casualty in a location where you have somebody with the M morale attribute, there's also an officer there. The officer is able to keep their morale up and keep them from giving up on the battle, even though something crazy just went down. So tactically, you're going to want to think about which of your defenders need to be paired together as they move around. Meanwhile, our French prisoners down here have a special ability that is marked by the letter I, that stands for Inspire, and they are able to basically boost the die rolls of defenders around them when they're in the same location. So a lot of this game is about increasing your chances of success by making sure that the right people are with the other right people in the right places throughout the game. Of course, as the game goes by, you're inevitably going to lose people. It's a pretty tough game. And you're also going to lose structural integrity in the building. So these shield tokens here, these defense tokens, basically tell you how good your fortifications are, and they're going to decrease as the game goes on. And of course, what that means is that when one of the enemies wants to disrupt a soldier inside one of those buildings, initially they have to roll pretty high. But before long, they don't have to roll quite as high anymore. And of course, over here at Besotted Jenny, you can eventually hit 0 and it can be destroyed. Each of the enemy cards is going to do something a little bit different. So sometimes they put new units on the board. Sometimes they cause attacks on the castle itself, which is how you can lose your defense value on different locations. You'll place various machine gun and mortar tokens that will then lead you to try to disrupt defenders who are in the castle. And then there's some cards that just attempt a disruption action on someone in one of these colored areas on the board. If you want an even tougher game, there are also tactics cards that add a little bit of extra challenge and give your enemy a new strategy or a new special ability every turn. Even without the tactics cards, this game is pretty brutal. As you put more enemy soldiers onto the board, they advance up these various tracks towards the castle. And what's going to happen is if an enemy is right up here at the castle and would advance, that means that they're entering Castle Itter and you lose the game, because once they actually get inside, you can't defend yourself anymore and it's done. So it's possible, I guess, that you would lose all of your guys or something like that, but actually the more likely outcome is that you just get overrun. So because you have so many problems happening on every single front and you're trying to do the best that you can with very limited resources, everything seems crazy and dramatic and tense the entire time. And it really does feel like a Valiant Defense. At the same time, mechanically the game is fairly simple. You draw a card, do what it says, move a guy, take one of a limited number of actions, and everything is resolved with a die roll. So while the actual game itself is not overly complicated, you'll definitely be feeling the push of the Germans as they advance on Castle Itter really quickly in the game. So now for some final thoughts. I will say right off the bat that Castle Itter is an excellent game. It's really good fun to play, especially if you like lots of tactical decisions under brutal circumstances, which is of course exactly what this game promises to deliver. I want to start off by saying that historically this game is fascinating because David Thompson really made an effort to allow you to experience what really happened during the actual battle, right down to a tennis player escaping the castle and potentially getting some reinforcements, and also down to the French prisoners in the cellar and the representation of soldiers of various nationalities all attempting to work together to fend off the Nazis one last time during World War II. The battle at Castle Itter was clearly a wild ride, and this game does a really good job faithfully representing what could have happened, who was there, and the sorts of challenges that they faced. So if you're looking for an interesting historical interlude and you want to experience it through a game, this is a great option. This game is also very difficult and very tense. Your defenders are very limited in what they're able to do, and there's a lot that needs to get done if they're going to successfully survive this entire onslaught, which leads to brutal choices throughout the entire game. And that also means that every single turn is a really good time, because your stress over what it is that you should do and your panic over the encroaching Nazi invaders really helps with immersion, and I get really into this game every time I play, even if things go very badly and not at all like the fortunate people who defended the real Castle Itter. Little touches like the risks and rewards of using Besotted Jenny, especially with characters who have tank abilities, is really awesome because you want to get in there and make the best of that position. But Besotted Jenny can also be completely destroyed and you don't want anybody to be in there when it happens. This is another one of those games that I like because the complexity of the gameplay comes from really wanting to make a whole bunch of choices and not being able to, as opposed to the game itself actually being complicated. The turn structure is relatively straightforward. The actions that you can take are also relatively straightforward. It's just a matter of deciding what it is that you want to do. As a solo player, I also really appreciate that the AI is run very smoothly. It is not hard to complete an AI turn in this game, and you will fear every card that you draw off the deck, but you're not going to fear it because you don't know what to do. You're going to fear it because you know it's going to be bad. This game does also come with a competitive variant, which I have not played. So Castle Itter is a fabulous game. Are there any reasons not to go out and just grab it? Well, I think that there are two. One is that if you are frustrated by having to unexhaust your defenders as an action because it makes you feel like you're wasting time, and that's just something that really frustrates you, this game will frustrate you. There will be times when you really need to get people refreshed, or there will be soldiers who are temporarily out of commission, and you'll need to take time and you'll need to take actions in order to get everybody ready to go again so you can do what you're actually excited about. If that's the sort of thing that will frustrate you, this game will frustrate you. The other aspect that doesn't bother me, but might bother you, is that this is very much a game that is dependent on the dice. There will be times when you have advantage on a die roll in the sense that you can roll extra dice, but if the dice don't go in your favor, they just don't. And if that's the sort of thing that really upsets you because, you laid your best plans and then you rolled the dice and it just didn't work out, then Castle Itter can really be a painful one. But for me, this game presents a delightful combination of historical interest, extreme tension, and just drama and story that's generated in a game, as well as the opportunity to make a lot of interesting tactical decisions throughout. It is not a surprise that I like Castle Itter because I also really enjoyed Pavlov's House, a game I've also reviewed for the Dice Tower, and I also gave that one a high score. I'm pretty sure I gave it the same one I'm about to give this one. Pavlov's House is the first published game in the Valiant Defense series. Castle Itter is technically the one that was designed first, but it is the second official published entry into the Valiant Defense series. And then there's a third that's coming up called Soldiers in Postmen's Uniforms. They are all a little bit different. For me, the thing that makes Pavlov's House really fun that doesn't exist in Castle Itter is that there's a lot of operational support. So in Pavlov's House, you're playing the Russians trying to hold an apartment building in Stalingrad against the Nazis. So one part of your turn is essentially giving supplies or trying to give supplies and keep communications open as the army who's not actually in the apartment building but trying to support the men who are there. And then the other part of your turn is the tactical decisions of the people defending Pavlov's House. In Castle Itter, that operational aspect is gone and it's just pure tactical fun. I think that they're both really good. It just depends on what your personal preference is. And for me, I would say that that is the main difference. But Castle Itter, fabulous game. I would rate it a 9 out of 10 and give it a Dice Tower seal of excellence. Happy gaming.